In the first in-depth video of the radical paradigm, I want to talk about a vision. One of my pet peeves, so one of my annoyances with the Agile paradigm is that it is at heart a reactive paradigm. It basically is the idea is that you're in a steady state, steady as she goes, and then something happens to us and we need to react to it in an Agile fashion. And to be honest, many companies where the business side and the engineering side of the house are not well connected are actually in that place where R&D basically gets hit out of left field with requests for functionality that simply they couldn't or didn't think of would ever be required or requested from them. And I think that that's a problem, because I think it is obvious for everyone that if you are unable as an architect and as an R&D team to predict what is coming, what is the most likely functionality that will be requested from the business side, you're unable to prepare, you're always behind the 8 ball, and the response time tends to be quite long because you didn't have any chance to prepare for things. So there is an interesting question that you can then ask yourself, and that is, okay, why are these poor souls in R&D so unaware of where the company is actually taking itself? I mean, what is it that is happening? And there is a few interesting patterns here. And the first is that many companies, even though they claim to have a strategy, they really don't. Yeah? They basically assume that since today is not that different from what it was yesterday, tomorrow will be the same as today, and simply we can continue to do what we've always been doing. So there's not really a need to define an actionable strategy for the organization. The second pattern that I've seen is that within the company, there are a number of powerful groups and individuals that are actually pursuing individual strategies that are competing with each other. So there is no alignment, no strategic alignment within the company, but instead everyone is basically pursuing their own strategy, or multiple groups are pursuing their own strategy. And whenever there are collisions, then often politics start and things become difficult. And if you are a naive engineer or architect that is simply trying to do the right thing, it's very easy to get thrown under the bus and basically become collateral damage in a conflict that actually never concerned you. You're just trying to do the right thing, but you still get hurt by it. The third pattern that I see a lot is local optimization, especially when there is a lot of change happening in the industry where the company is in, and the C-suite hasn't really aligned and figured out what strategy or what response they have to this rapid change. Then what we see is that every unit and every function starts to organize and optimize for its own local priorities. And we often see this for instance, in the mechanical and electronics engineering in companies. I mean, when there is no clear strategic guidance from the top, what these functions within the company will do is they will focus on minimizing the total bill of materials, so that you can make the product as cheap as possible, which then obviously kills any opportunities that you may have from a continuous revenue perspective, because there's no space in the product left. But the idea basically is that you get different teams and organizations that start to optimize for their own interests rather than for the company strategy. I think that all these patterns that I've been seeing reinforce the same conclusions. I mean, companies need to have a clear, precise strategy that is defined and communicated. And that seems like the most obvious thing in the world. And then the question becomes, why is this so hard to deliver on? Why is this so hard to actually realize in practice? And I see three behaviors. I mean, the first is liberal interpretation. And what I mean with that is that often the strategy documents tend to be watered down in the process in order to make sure that everyone feels somewhat inclusive towards the strategy. And what then happens is that because the strategy can mean anything that you want it to mean, you can basically do whatever you want and still claim that you're delivering on the strategy or contributing to the strategy. The second part, pattern which I see, is lip service. And what happens then is that everyone says, yes, we're following the strategy, and the strategy is really important, and we really should realize this strategy. But then if you look at their day-to-day behavior, it's actually at odds with the strategy. People don't follow the strategy, they just say they follow the strategy. And I think that this is an important one, because very often there is this notion of what people say they do and what people actually do in practice. And then finally, there is the lack of commitment. I mean, there are situations where even if the CEO or some leader in the company defines the strategy, people simply do not commit to the strategy. I've even seen cases where the C-suite, individuals within the C-suite of the company, were simply not committing and following the strategy and doing their own thing because they thought that they knew better. And these are, of course, patterns that are very detrimental for a company, especially in the long term. And I believe that we should really focus on defining strategy in quantitative, measurable terms, and then make sure that the company commits to it, organizes everyone in the company around delivering on the quantitative KPIs that the strategy actually defines, and then, of course, being responsive when external events cause us to change. In Alice in Wonderland, Alice asks the Cheshire Cat at some point which road she should take. She's basically at a crossroads. And then the cat responds by, well, that really depends on where you want to get to. And then when Alice answers that she doesn't really care where she ends up, then the cat tells her that she can take any road she wants. And I think that that's the challenge that many companies struggle with. There is an insufficiently clear strategy. It is too broad, it lacks too much specificity. And what happens is that everyone in the company is basically moving in their own direction. So I believe that strategy is really about shaping the future. And to quote Alan Kay, I think many of you know the quote, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And you do that with a clear strategy that defines your future desired state. You don't do that by just accidentally executing and seeing what happens.